There's a dandelion pushing through a crack in the sidewalk right outside a CVS in Brooklyn. Nobody looks at it twice. People step over it, spray it, curse it for ruining their lawns. But that single plant, the one you've been poisoning with herbicide every spring, was carried by Roman soldiers, brewed by Chinese physicians over 1,000 years ago, and referenced in Ayurvedic texts as a liver-cleansing staple. Willow bark, another so-called weed tree, gave us the molecular ancestor of aspirin after 35 centuries of documented use across Egyptian, Greek, and Native American traditions. Your grandparents knew these plants. Battlefield medics packed them in kits. And now, PubMed has the receipts. What you've been calling weeds, history calls medicine, and modern science is confirming why. And one plant on this list has over 2,000 years of respiratory use across 3 continents. Another is the direct ancestor of one of the world's most common painkillers. You've been throwing away your medicine cabinet. Let's start with the one you've probably tried to kill. Dandelion, the whole body reset, is the most aggressively dismissed medicinal plant on the planet. You see it in every yard, every vacant lot, every neglected strip of earth between the sidewalk and the street. Bright yellow heads, jagged toothed leaves, that hollow stem that bleeds white latex when you snap it. Kids blow the seed heads for fun. Homeowners dump chemicals on it like it's the enemy. But here's what nobody told you. Traditional Chinese medicine has used dandelion root and leaf preparations for centuries, on primarily for supporting liver and digestive function. Ayurvedic practitioners across the Indian subcontinent documented similar applications, and Native American communities, thousands of miles away, with no shared communication, independently arrived at many of the same conclusions, using dandelion for digestive support and as a spring cleansing tonic. 3 systems, 3 continents, same plant, same applications. Modern research is starting to explain why. Studies have investigated dandelion root extract for its hepatoprotective properties, meaning it appears to support the liver's natural detoxification processes. The compounds taraxacin and taraxacirin, unique to this genus, have shown activity in preliminary laboratory research. Inulin, a prebiotic fiber concentrated in the root, feeds beneficial gut bacteria. And the whole plant has demonstrated notable diuretic effects in early human studies, so reliable that its French folk name, pissenlit, literally translates to what you think it does. People brew the roasted root as a coffee substitute, toss the young leaves into salads, and steep the dried plant as a digestive tea. The preparation is almost absurdly simple, yet most people spend money and effort specifically trying to destroy it. The forgotten twist is brutal. The plant your grandparents would have harvested for spring tonics is the same one you've been soaking in glyphosate. You're not removing a weed, you're poisoning a pharmacy. Think of dandelion as a maintenance crew for your internal systems. Quiet, reliable, showing up whether you want it to or not. And it's just the beginning. Now, here's one that's probably already in your kitchen. Peppermint, the gut mechanic, has a history that stretches back further than most people realize. Dried peppermint leaves were found in Egyptian tombs dating to around 1000 BC. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents in existence, references mint for digestive complaints. Romans scattered it at feasts, not just for the aroma, but because they understood it settled the stomach after excess. The plant itself is unmistakable. Square stems, serrated oval leaves with that cool bite when you crush them between your fingers, and an aroma so sharp and clean it almost stings the sinuses. It spreads aggressively in any moist soil, which is why a pot on your windowsill is actually the ideal way to grow it, contained but prolific. Here's where modern science caught up to ancient practice. Clinical trials, actual randomized controlled studies, have shown that enteric-coated peppermint oil capsules significantly reduce symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome. One meta-analysis published in BMC Complementary Medicine and Therapies found peppermint oil to be, and this is a direct quote, significantly superior to placebo for global improvement of IBS symptoms. The mechanism is menthol, peppermint's signature compound. Menthol acts as a natural smooth muscle relaxant. It physically eases the spasming of intestinal walls that causes cramping and discomfort. It's also why peppermint tea has been a go-to remedy for nausea and bloating in virtually every culture that had access to the plant. People steep the fresh leaves, add them to cold water, or simply chew a leaf after meals. The taste is bright, sharp, and cooling. The original after-dinner mint, centuries before anyone wrapped one in plastic. Why was it forgotten as medicine? Because it was reclassified as flavor. Peppermint became a candy taste, a toothpaste additive, a gum ingredient, stripped of its context as a digestive tool. Like a reset button for your digestive tract, except the reset button got hidden inside a pack of chewing gum. If peppermint is the mechanic, then chamomile, the night shift healer, is the quiet technician who shows up when everyone else has gone home. You know it as a bedtime tea. Something gentle, grandmotherly, maybe a little boring. But chamomile's actual resume is anything but mild. Ancient Egyptians dedicated it to their sun god Ra and used it for fevers. Greek physicians prescribed it. Roman soldiers bathed in it to recover from long marches. The plant grows low and sprawling, with those small daisy-like flowers, white petals radiating from a puffy golden center, that release an apple-sweet fragrance when crushed. The scent alone is a sensory anchor, warm, fruity, faintly herbaceous. The dried flowers feel papery and light, almost weightless between your fingers. Now here's the part that should make you rethink the just a bedtime tea dismissal. The active compound epigenin, found abundantly in chamomile flowers, binds to benzodiazepine receptors in the brain. Yes, the same receptor class targeted by prescription anti-anxiety medications. Randomized controlled trials have shown chamomile extract to significantly improve sleep quality in elderly participants and to reduce generalized anxiety symptoms. FARS, a 2016 study published in Phytomedicine, found long-term chamomile use meaningfully reduced moderate to severe generalized anxiety disorder symptoms. This is not folk superstition. This is receptor-level biochemistry validated by clinical research. People drink the tea before bed, use the cooled infusion as a skin wash for irritation, and some apply chamomile compresses for minor inflammation. The preparation couldn't be simpler: dried flowers and hot water. But here's the twist that should bother you. Chamomile can't be patented. No pharmaceutical company can own a daisy. So, a clinically validated anxiolytic that you can grow on your windowsill for pennies gets filed under grandma's home remedy, while the patentable alternatives get the marketing budget. Chamomile isn't a sleep aid you outgrew. It's a neurochemistry tool dressed in humble flowers. This next one is hiding in your spice rack right now, and it has a battlefield history that most people never hear about. Thyme, the kitchen antibiotic, is one of the most underestimated antimicrobial plants in existence. Those tiny, woody-stemmed clusters of gray-green leaves that you toss into soups and roasts were once considered serious medical tools. During the medieval plague years, bundles of thyme were burned in sick rooms and carried in pouches against the chest. Not as superstition, but as the best antimicrobial technology available. During World War I, before the wide availability of modern antiseptics, thymol, thyme's primary active compound, was used to medicate bandages and disinfect wounds on the battlefield. Crush a sprig between your fingers and you'll understand why. The aroma is intense, sharp, almost medicinal, even raw. The leaves are tiny, slightly fuzzy, and release their essential oils at the slightest pressure. Modern research confirms what soldiers and plague survivors already knew. Thymol has demonstrated significant antimicrobial activity against a range of bacterial and fungal organisms in laboratory studies. It disrupts microbial cell membranes, essentially puncturing the defenses of pathogens. People use thyme steam inhalation for respiratory congestion, brew it as a strong tea for sore throats, and add it liberally to cooking where it does double duty as flavor and functional support. One systematic review noted thyme preparations showed promising results in upper respiratory tract management. It grows easily in a sunny windowsill pot, requires minimal water, and actually produces stronger essential oil concentrations when slightly stressed by dry conditions. The more you neglect it, the more potent it gets. That's not a metaphor. That's plant chemistry. Thyme was replaced, not because something better came along, but because pills were more convenient than herbs. The kitchen antibiotic never stopped working. People just stopped reaching for it. And now, for one that's been sitting on kitchen counters and bathroom shelves for decades without anyone fully appreciating what it is. Aloe vera, the burnwort in a pot, has a documented history so dramatic it borders on legend. The ancient Egyptians called it the plant of immortality and included it in burial offerings for pharaohs. Cleopatra reportedly used it in her daily skincare rituals. Alexander the Great allegedly conquered the island of Socotra specifically to secure its aloe supply for treating his soldiers' wounds on campaign. Whether every detail of that story holds up to scrutiny, the pattern is unmistakable. Powerful people across centuries considered this plant strategically valuable. You've seen it, those thick, fleshy, spike-edged leaves that look almost artificial, filled with a cool, translucent gel that feels slippery and slightly sticky when you slice a leaf open. It grows on a windowsill with almost zero attention, tolerating neglect like it was designed for forgetful plant owners. The modern research on aloe's topical applications is robust. Studies have confirmed that the gel accelerates wound healing, reduces burn recovery time, and provides meaningful anti-inflammatory effects on skin. The compounds osmannin and various anthraquinones in the gel modulate inflammation and support tissue repair. People slice a leaf and apply the gel directly to minor burns, sunburns, skin irritation, and small wounds, the simplest possible medicine. Important qualification: aloe's internal use is significantly less supported by evidence than topical application, and some preparations can cause digestive discomfort. The traditional use was overwhelmingly external. This is where honesty matters. Not every application carries equal evidence. But for what it does best, skin healing and burn recovery, aloe vera is as well documented as any plant on Earth. 5 plants in, all windowsill-friendly, all dismissed by modern convenience culture, all documented by both ancient tradition and modern research. And we're just getting started. Here's something worth pausing on before we go deeper. The 5 plants you just encountered were valued independently by Ayurvedic medicine in India, traditional Chinese medicine in East Asia, European herbal traditions, and indigenous healing systems across the Americas. These systems had no contact with each other for most of history, yet they converged on remarkably similar applications for remarkably similar plants. That's not coincidence, that's convergent empirical observation across thousands of years. Modern pharmacy didn't replace this knowledge because it was wrong. It replaced it because you can't patent a dandelion. But the knowledge is still here. The plants are still here. And now we're moving into the ones that'll genuinely surprise you. Now things escalate. Rosemary, the memory keeper, is one of those plants people think they know, but they only know the surface. You know the aroma, piney, resinous, warm, almost camphor-sharp when you rub the needle-like leaves between your palms. You know the taste in roasted potatoes and focaccia. What you might not know is that Greek students wore rosemary garlands during examinations, believing it sharpened memory and focus. Shakespeare referenced it. Rosemary, that's for remembrance. But it wasn't just literary symbolism. These cultures were observing a real cognitive effect they couldn't yet name. The compound responsible is carnosic acid, a potent antioxidant that crosses the blood-brain barrier. Neuroprotective research has shown it protects brain cells from oxidative damage, the kind of gradual cellular stress associated with cognitive decline. A study in Therapeutic Advances in Psychopharmacology found that even the aroma of rosemary essential oil was associated with improved cognitive performance and mood in test subjects. People grow it on sunny windowsills where it thrives in well-drained soil, harvest sprigs for cooking, and steep it as a sharp, warming tea. The texture is distinctive. Those stiff, narrow leaves almost feel like tiny pine needles, and the woody stems snap with a satisfying crack. Our rosemary was replaced in the cognitive support conversation by synthetic nootropics and supplement stacks costing $30 or $40 a bottle. Meanwhile, a $5 rosemary plant on your kitchen windowsill does what Greek scholars already figured out 2,000 years ago. It's like a maintenance crew for your neural pathways, working quietly in the background every time you cook with it. If you're starting to notice a pattern, ancient wisdom validated by modern labs, hold that thought, because this next one might be the most dramatic example yet. Lavender, the field hospital flower, owes its modern medicinal reputation to a literal accident. In 1910, French chemist René Maurice Gattefossé severely burned his hand in a laboratory explosion and, reportedly in desperation, unplunged it into the nearest container of liquid, which happened to be lavender essential oil. The rapid healing he observed launched his investigation into what he eventually coined aromatherapy. But lavender's use goes back much further. Roman soldiers carried it for wound care. Medieval herbalists prescribed it for everything from headaches to hysteria. The plant itself is unmistakable: silvery green foliage, those iconic purple flower spikes, and a scent so distinctive it's become synonymous with relaxation. Run your hand along the flower stalks and your fingers come away fragrant, slightly sticky with essential oils. Modern clinical research has gone far beyond Gattefossé's burned hand. Linalool, lavender's primary active compound, has demonstrated anxiolytic effects in multiple controlled trials. A study published in Phytomedicine compared a standardized lavender oil preparation to lorazepam, a common prescription benzodiazepine, and found comparable efficacy for generalized anxiety without the sedation or dependency risk. That finding alone should reframe how you think about the purple plant in your garden. People use dried lavender in sachets, brew it as a mild calming tea, add the essential oil to baths, and grow it in sunny windowsill pots where it thrives with minimal watering. The forgotten twist is the same one we keep seeing: a clinically comparable anxiolytic that grows from seed in any sunny spot can't compete with pharmaceutical marketing budgets. Lavender isn't just a scent for soap. It's a field-tested, lab-validated calming agent wearing a pretty purple disguise. Keep going. Because the next one is something you've probably eaten 100 times without realizing what it's doing. Basil, and specifically holy basil, known as tulsi, is the adaptogen you've been cooking with and never recognized. Common sweet basil is a kitchen staple worldwide, but its sacred cousin tulsi holds a position in Ayurvedic medicine that borders on reverence. For over 3,000 years, tulsi has been called the incomparable one in Hindu tradition, planted at doorways for protection and health, and prescribed as a cornerstone adaptogenic herb, meaning it helps the body moderate its stress response. The leaves are slightly fuzzy, aromatic with a complex scent that's part clove, part pepper, part something uniquely green and warm. Crushed between your fingers, they release eugenol, the same compound that gives cloves their distinctive burn. That eugenol isn't just flavor. It's a documented anti-inflammatory compound that inhibits cyclooxygenase enzymes, the same pathway targeted by ibuprofen. Clinical trials on tulsi extracts have shown measurable reductions in stress-related symptoms, including improved cortisol regulation and reduced anxiety scores. A review in the Journal of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine called it a herb for all reasons, noting consistent evidence across multiple trials for stress adaptation and immune modulation. Regular basil shares some of these compounds in smaller concentrations, which is why cultures around the Mediterranean, Southeast Asia, and Africa have all used various basil species medicinally for centuries. People brew tulsi tea daily, add fresh basil to meals, and grow both varieties easily indoors. Holy basil actually prefers the warm, consistent conditions of a kitchen windowsill. The adaptogen craze sells repackaged ashwagandha capsules for premium prices. Meanwhile, the original adaptogen has been sitting in terracotta pots on Indian windowsills for millennia. If you're realizing how much has been hiding in your spice rack, Share this with someone who needs to hear it. This next one has a maritime history that spans 5,000 years and a modern validation so strong it's used in clinical oncology settings. Ginger, the nausea killer, is probably the single most extensively studied anti-nausea plant on Earth. Sailors across Asia and the Indian Ocean chewed raw ginger root to combat seasickness for centuries. Traditional Chinese medicine classifies it as a warming digestive herb essential for balancing cold conditions. Ayurvedic practitioners call it the universal medicine. The root itself is knobby, golden-skinned, with pale yellow flesh that's fibrous and juicy when sliced. The smell is instantly recognizable, sharp, warm, slightly sweet, with a peppery bite that builds heat on the tongue. The active compounds are gingerols and shuggles, which interact with serotonin receptors in the gut, the same receptor pathway involved in chemotherapy-induced nausea. That's not folk medicine talking. Multiple randomized controlled trials have demonstrated that ginger supplementation significantly reduces nausea severity in chemotherapy patients, pregnant individuals with morning sickness, and post-surgical recovery. A Cochrane-style review noted consistent evidence of ginger's antiemetic effects across multiple clinical populations. It's one of the few herbal medicines that's made the crossover into mainstream clinical conversations. People grate fresh root into hot water for an immediate stomach settler, candy it for travel nausea, juice it raw, and grow it indoors from grocery store root pieces. Just stick a knob in a pot of moist soil on a warm windowsill and watch it shoot up green stalks within weeks. Why was it forgotten as medicine? It wasn't, entirely. Ginger is one of the rare plants that maintained some mainstream credibility. But the depth of its clinical validation, especially in oncology support, is far beyond what most people associate with a stir-fry ingredient. Ginger isn't a folk remedy that modern science tolerates. It's a pharmacological tool that folk wisdom identified 5,000 years early. Now we're getting into the plants that blur the line between herb and cognitive tool, and this one might be the most underrated of the entire list. Lemon balm, the calm focus plant, has a pedigree that traces back to one of history's most famous physicians. Avicenna, the 11th century Persian polymath whose canon of medicine influenced both Islamic and European medical practice for centuries, specifically recommended lemon balm for melancholy and to make the heart merry. That's not vague mysticism. That's a clinical observation wrapped in the language of its time. The plant looks deceptively simple. Soft, crinkled leaves shaped like rounded hearts, growing in bushy mounds with a fresh, lemony scent that releases when you brush against it. The texture is almost velvety, slightly sticky with the essential oils that carry its active compounds. The key compound is rosmarinic acid, which has demonstrated both anxiolytic and cognitive-enhancing properties in controlled studies. A study in nutrients found that lemon balm extract improved both calmness and working memory performance in healthy adults, a rare combination. Most things that calm you down also slow your thinking. Lemon balm appears to do both simultaneously, reduce anxiety while maintaining or improving cognitive sharpness. That dual action is why it was historically combined with other herbs for both exam preparation and emotional recovery. People steep the fresh leaves as a bright, citrusy tea, add them to salads, or grow the plant as a fragrant windowsill herb that tolerates partial shade better than most on this list. It spreads enthusiastically, which means one small plant quickly becomes a sustainable supply. Avicenna prescribed this for low mood 1,000 years ago. Modern neuroscience is now mapping the receptor activity that explains exactly why it worked. The calm focus plant was never debunked. It was just filed under just a lemon tea and left on the shelf. Like a tuning fork for your nervous system, setting the frequency without forcing the note. Here's one where the name literally tells you everything. Sage, the throat guardian, comes from the Latin salvare, which means to save or to heal. The Romans didn't name it lightly, and they considered sage so essential that harvesting it required a specific ritual. The gatherer had to wear clean clothes and make offerings before cutting. Medieval European herbalists listed it among the most important plants in existence, and the famous saying from the Salerno Medical School asked, "Why should a man die while sage grows in his garden?" The plant is beautiful in a rugged way. Silvery green velvety leaves that feel almost like soft suede, with a warm, slightly camphoraceous aroma that deepens when dried. It grows readily in pots, preferring dry conditions and full sun. Modern research has investigated sage across several interesting applications. Clinical trials have shown sage extracts can reduce menopausal hot flashes, a finding published in Advances in Therapy that showed significant symptom reduction over 8 weeks. The compounds thujone, camphor, and rosmarinic acid contribute to both its antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties. Gargling with strong sage tea for sore throats is one of the oldest and most widespread herbal practices in European tradition, and laboratory studies confirm its antimicrobial activity against common oral and throat pathogens. People brew it as a strong tea, use it as a gargle, add it to cooking, and burn dried bundles, a practice with roots in both European and indigenous American traditions. Sage grows compactly enough for any windowsill and actually produces more concentrated essential oils in slightly stressed, drier conditions. The irony of sage is almost poetic. A plant so respected that the Romans ritualized its harvest, so documented that medieval physicians called it life-saving, now gets used primarily to season Thanksgiving stuffing. The throat guardian didn't lose its power, it just lost its audience. Now, let me tell you about one that earned its reputation in the worst conditions imaginable. Calendula, the skin rebuilder, is that bright orange-gold flower you've seen in cottage gardens and herbal tea blends, cheerful and unassuming. But during the American Civil War, field surgeons used calendula poultices directly on open wounds when proper medical supplies ran short. It wasn't a last resort out of desperation. It was a deliberate choice based on observed outcomes. Battlefield conditions were brutal. Infected wounds were the primary killer, far more than bullets themselves. Surgeons who packed wounds with calendula petals reported better healing outcomes than those using available alternatives. The flowers are vivid, sticky with resin when fresh, and have a faintly bitter, herbaceous scent. The petals feel slightly waxy between your fingers, leaving a yellowish-orange stain from the carotenoids and flavonoids concentrated in the tissue. Those compounds, triterpenoids, carotenoids, and flavonoids, are the basis of calendula's modern wound healing validation. Studies have shown calendula preparations accelerate wound closure, reduce inflammation, and promote tissue regeneration. A clinical trial published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology found calendula cream significantly reduced the severity of radiation dermatitis in breast cancer patients compared to a standard pharmaceutical cream. That's a medical journal, not a folk remedy collection. People grow calendula from seed on sunny windowsills. It germinates fast and blooms within weeks, and use the dried petals in salves, infused oils, and skin-soothing teas. It's one of the easiest medicinal plants to cultivate indoors. Calendula was replaced by petroleum-based ointments and synthetic wound creams that came in convenient tubes. The Civil War surgeons didn't have those tubes. They had petals, poultices, and observation. And the clinical data now says they were onto something real. The skin rebuilder didn't need a lab to prove itself. It needed a war. This one is where the spice rack starts looking less like a cooking shelf and more like a forgotten medicine cabinet. Oregano, the Mediterranean shield, was prescribed by Hippocrates himself, the founder of Western medicine, primarily for respiratory and digestive complaints. That's not marketing copy. That's a 2,400-year chain of documented use stretching from ancient Greece through Roman medicine, medieval herbalism, and Mediterranean folk practice into the modern era. The plant is vigorous, small, round, dark green leaves on wiry stems, growing in dense clusters that release an intense, warm, almost peppery fragrance when disturbed. Rub the leaves and your hands smell like a pizzeria, but sharper, more complex, with a biting warmth underneath the familiar flavor. The primary active compound is carvacrol, which has demonstrated potent antimicrobial activity in laboratory studies, effective against a range of bacterial and fungal organisms. Some research has investigated carvacrol's mechanisms at the cellular level, showing it disrupts pathogen cell membranes much like thymol does. Essential qualification here: oregano essential oil and culinary oregano are vastly different concentrations. The oil is extremely potent and can cause irritation if misused. The dried herb in cooking, while beneficial, delivers compounds in much smaller doses. Traditional use was primarily as a strong tea or steam inhalation for respiratory congestion and as a culinary herb consumed daily in Mediterranean diets, which, not coincidentally, are among the most extensively studied diets for longevity. One review in Critical Reviews in Food Science and Nutrition called oregano's bioactive profile remarkably diverse in antimicrobial and antioxidant capacity. People grow it easily on sunny windowsills and harvest regularly. But the gap between what oregano is and what most people think it is remains enormous. You've been seasoning pizza with a plant that Hippocrates prescribed as medicine. That's not a coincidence, it's a clue. Now we're entering the tier where history gets dramatic, science gets emphatic, and every plant on the list carries a story that should genuinely change how you see the natural world. These are the legendary ones, the plants that teaser hooks are made of, the ones with ancient pedigree and modern confirmations stacked so high, it's almost uncomfortable how little attention they get. Let's start with the biggest reveal on this entire list. Willow bark, the original aspirin, isn't just related to the most widely used painkiller in human history. It is the direct molecular ancestor. Sumerian clay tablets from roughly 4,000 years ago reference willow for pain relief. Hippocrates prescribed chewing willow bark for fever and inflammation around 400 BC. Native American nations across the continent used various willow species for pain, fever, and headache, completely independently of European or Middle Eastern traditions. The tree grows along waterways, recognizable by its long, narrow, silvery green leaves and flexible branches that sway in the slightest wind. The bark has a bitter, astringent taste, not pleasant, but unmistakably medicinal even before you know why. The compound is salicin. When you ingest willow bark, your body converts salicin into salicylic acid, the direct precursor to acetyl-salicylic acid, which is the chemical name for aspirin. In 1897, biochemist Felix Hoffmann synthesized acetyl-salicylic acid, and the pharmaceutical era essentially began. But the molecule's story started in the bark of a riverside tree thousands of years earlier. While growing a full willow indoors isn't practical, dwarf willow varieties exist for container growing, and the plant serves as the perfect symbolic anchor for this entire list. The most iconic drug in modern history was reverse-engineered from a tree that people walked past for millennia. Aspirin didn't come from a laboratory. It came from a bark that healers on 3 continents already knew worked. Modern pharmacy didn't invent the medicine, it just patented the copy. If the last one showed you where modern pharmacy came from, this next one shows you what it still can't quite replicate. Feverfew, the migraine plant pharma couldn't patent, has one of the most interesting collision stories between folk medicine and clinical science. Its name is a corruption of featherfew, from the Latin febrifugia, meaning fever reducer. Medieval English herbalists prescribed it widely, and for centuries it was a standard cottage garden plant grown specifically for headache and fever management. The plant is modest, small daisy-like white flowers with yellow centers, growing on bushy stems with deeply lobed yellowish-green leaves that have a bitter, pungent smell when crushed. The texture of the leaves is soft but slightly rough, and the taste is sharply bitter. People historically chewed the fresh leaves despite the unpleasant flavor because the results were worth it. The active compound is parthenolide, which inhibits the release of serotonin and prostaglandins, both implicated in the inflammatory cascade that triggers migraines. A landmark study published in The Lancet in 1988, one of the world's most prestigious medical journals, found that feverfew significantly reduced migraine frequency and severity compared to placebo. Subsequent studies have produced mixed results, with the quality and standardization of feverfew preparations varying widely, which researchers noted as a key variable. Promising but dependent on preparation quality is the honest scientific summary. People grow it easily in containers. It's practically a weed in temperate climates, and traditionally consumed fresh leaves or brewed dried leaf tea. The forgotten twist is revealing. Pharmaceutical companies invested significant resources trying to synthesize parthenolide into a standardized drug. The compound proved difficult to isolate and stabilize economically. You can't efficiently patent a daisy, so the research attention drifted toward proprietary alternatives that could be manufactured and marketed. Feverfew didn't fail. The business model around it didn't work. The plant itself, sitting in a windowsill pot, blooming quietly, keeps doing what the Lancet said it does. This next one has a wartime history that most people have never heard, and it deserves more attention than it gets. On valerian, the sleep drug before sleep drugs existed, was one of the primary calming agents available during some of history's most stressful chapters. Roman physician Galen prescribed valerian for insomnia in the 2nd century. Greek physician Dioscorides documented it before that. But the most vivid chapter in valerian's story comes from World War II, when British civilians enduring the Blitz, the relentless German bombing campaign over London and other cities, used valerian root preparations to manage the crushing anxiety of nightly air raids. When you're sleeping in a tube station hoping your house survives the night, you reach for whatever actually works. Valerian worked. The plant itself grows vigorously, with pinnate leaves on tall stems and clusters of small white or pink flowers that have a sweet scent. The root, however, is the medicinal part, and it smells pungent, earthy, almost unpleasantly strong. Some describe it as old socks. The taste is similarly intense, deeply bitter and musky. The mechanism involves interaction with gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA, the primary calming neurotransmitter. Valerianic acid, the root's key compound, appears to inhibit the breakdown of GABA in the brain, essentially extending the duration of the brain's own calming signal. Clinical comparisons have shown modest but consistent sleep quality improvements, with some studies noting effects comparable to low-dose mild sedatives, without the dependency risk or morning grogginess. One systematic review described the evidence as suggestive of efficacy for sleep improvement, though methodological quality varies. Valerian grows well in deep containers on a balcony or wide windowsill. People brew the dried root as a strong tea before bed, though the taste requires commitment. Valerian didn't disappear because it was debunked. It disappeared because synthetic sleep medications offered faster onset in a culture that demands instant results. The Blitz survivors didn't have that option. They had a bitter root, centuries of evidence, and the practical knowledge that it helped them close their eyes when the world was falling apart above them. If you've ever dealt with a stubborn cold that wouldn't quit, listen to this one carefully. Echinacea, the immune primer the Plains nations knew, holds a distinction that often gets lost in the modern supplement aisle. It was the most widely used medicinal plant among Native American nations across the Great Plains. The Cheyenne used it for sore throats. The Lakota used it for pain and infection. The Pawnee, the Comanche, the Kiowa, each with their own applications, all converging on the same genus of purple coneflower. Long before it became a capsule in a health food store, Echinacea was a plant that indigenous communities relied on for immune support in some of the harshest living conditions on the continent. The plant is striking. Tall stems topped with distinctive cone-shaped flower heads surrounded by drooping pink-purple petals. The leaves are rough, lance-shaped, and slightly hairy. If you chew the fresh root, you'll feel a characteristic tingling and numbing sensation on your tongue. That's the alkamides at work. Those alkamides, along with polysaccharides and caffeic acid derivatives, modulate immune cell activity. Meta-analyses examining echinacea's effect on the common cold have found modest but consistent reductions in cold duration and severity when taken at symptom onset. A comprehensive review in the Lancet Infectious Diseases found that echinacea reduced the odds of developing a cold by 58% in pooled analysis, though individual study quality varied significantly, and later analyses have debated the magnitude of the effect. The honest assessment: evidence supports modest immune-modulating benefit, not a miracle cure. People grow echinacea in containers from seed. It's a hardy perennial that tolerates a range of conditions, and brew root or flower tea at the first sign of illness. The transition from Plains Nation medicine to health store supplement stripped echinacea of its cultural context and turned it into a commodity. But the plant itself, growing in a pot on your sill with those unmistakable purple coneflowers, carries the weight of centuries of careful observation by people who couldn't afford to be wrong about their medicine. Now we've reached one that connects the dots between the oldest surviving medical system on Earth and the cutting-edge stress research of the 21st century. Ashwagandha, the warrior's root, has been a cornerstone of Ayurvedic medicine for over 3,000 years. Are classified as a rasayana, a rejuvenative herb believed to promote longevity and vitality. Its Sanskrit name translates roughly to smell of the horse, referring both to the root's distinctive horsey odor and to the traditional belief that it conferred the strength and stamina of a stallion. Warriors and laborers took it before demanding physical efforts. Scholars used it for sustained mental clarity. The root is thick, tuberous, and woody, with a dull tan exterior and a starchy, slightly bitter interior. The scent is earthy, warm, and pungent, unmistakable once you've encountered it. The plant itself is a small, nondescript shrub with oval leaves and small green flowers that produce bright red berries enclosed in a papery calyx. The active compounds are withanalydes, steroidal lactones that modulate the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is the body's central stress response system. Randomized controlled trials have demonstrated that ashwagandha root extract significantly reduces serum cortisol levels, the primary stress hormone, by measurable margins. A study in the Journal of the American Nutraceutical Association found significant reductions in stress and anxiety scores compared to placebo. Another trial published in the Indian Journal of Psychological Medicine reported meaningful improvements in resistance to stress and self-assessed quality of life. People grow ashwagandha from seed in warm indoor conditions. It thrives in the consistent temperatures of a heated home, and traditionally consume the dried root powder in warm milk or as a capsule. Evidence here varies by preparation and dose, and not every traditional claim has been clinically validated. But the pattern holds. Traditional use does not equal guaranteed clinical outcome, yet the convergence of ancient practice and modern trials on cortisol regulation is too consistent to dismiss. The modern stress epidemic sends people searching for solutions in supplement aisles, nootropic stacks, and wellness subscriptions. The warrior's root has been waiting quietly for 3,000 years, costing almost nothing to grow, asking only for warm soil and a sunny window. We've covered 18 plants, 18 perception reversals, 18 moments where what you thought was common turned out to be documented and powerful. But these last two aren't just additions to the list. They're the synthesis, the plants that embody everything this countdown has been building toward. Moringa, the survival tree, is called that because in parts of sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, it has literally been the difference between surviving and not. In regions where malnutrition affects millions, moringa leaves provide a concentration of vitamins and minerals that reads like a multivitamin label. Significant amounts of vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, potassium, iron, and protein by dry weight. Some nutritional analyses show moringa leaf powder containing more iron than spinach, more calcium than milk by weight, and more vitamin C than oranges, though exact values depend on growing conditions and preparation. Traditional use across West African, East African, Indian, And Southeast Asian communities includes everything from nutrient supplementation to wound care to water purification. Yes, moringa seeds contain proteins that can clarify turbid water by binding to impurities and settling them out, a property documented in water treatment research and used in real-world humanitarian applications. The plant grows astonishingly fast, up to several feet in a single season, and can be propagated from stem cuttings in a pot on a sunny windowsill, though it'll eventually want more space. The leaves are small, round, and compound, growing on delicate branching stems. They have a mild, slightly peppery taste, not unpleasant at all, and a fresh green scent. People add the dried leaf powder to smoothies, soups, and teas, or eat the young leaves fresh. Early research has investigated moringa's antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties, though much of the evidence base is still building beyond nutritional data. Traditional claims are extensive, clinical validation is catching up, but the nutritional profile alone makes moringa extraordinary. In countries where pharmaceutical infrastructure is limited, this plant has functioned as both food and medicine, a dual role that Western categorization struggles to accommodate. The survival tree doesn't care about categories, it just grows, feeds, and quietly proves that the most powerful medicine sometimes isn't medicine at all. It's food that does more than feed you. And now the final plant on this list, and I chose it deliberately to close with because it is the perfect embodiment of everything you've just experienced. On stinging nettle, the plant that fights back, for you, is hated, genuinely despised. Touch it with bare skin, and you get an immediate burning sting from hollow silica-tipped hairs on the leaves and stems that inject histamine and formic acid on contact. The leaves are serrated, heart-shaped, covered in those fine, weaponized hairs that catch the light. It grows aggressively in disturbed soil, vacant lots, forest edges, roadsides, and anywhere humans have neglected. It's the ultimate weed, the thing you avoid, the plant that literally attacks you. And it might be one of the most nutritious and medicinally documented plants in the Northern Hemisphere. Viking settlers cultivated nettle deliberately for food, fiber, and medicine. Anglo-Saxon healers listed it among their most essential herbs. European folk tradition used nettle preparations for joint pain, allergies, and urinary health for centuries. Applications that modern research has begun to validate. The leaves, once dried or cooked, lose their sting entirely and become a remarkably nutrient-dense green, high in iron, calcium, magnesium, and vitamins A and C. The taste, when prepared as tea, is mild, earthy, and slightly grassy. Nothing like the hostility of the living plant. Studies have investigated nettle root extracts for benign prostate support and nettle leaf preparations for anti-inflammatory and antihistamine properties. A study in the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine found nettle preparations worthy of further investigation for allergic rhinitis. The compound profile includes flavonoids, lignans, As and polyphenols that together contribute to a broad anti-inflammatory effect. People grow nettle from seed indoors, carefully with gloves during handling, and harvest the young tops for tea, soup, or dried powder. You can grow it on your windowsill. The plant that stings you can support you. And that's the whole story, isn't it? Every plant on this list was dismissed, ignored, mowed down, sprayed, stepped over, or cursed at. And every single one has documented, researched, traditional, and clinically investigated power that most people never learn about. This knowledge was never destroyed. It was never truly lost. It was just made inconvenient by a system that profits from your not knowing it. Remember the dandelion from the opening, pushing through the sidewalk crack outside the pharmacy? You've walked past that scene 1,000 times. But next time, you'll know what you're looking at. You'll know that the crack in the concrete isn't a sign of neglect. It's a sign of persistence, the same persistence that kept this knowledge alive through empires, epidemics, wars, and the quiet erasure of convenience culture. Your windowsill isn't decoration. It's a library that's been waiting for you to read it. None of this replaces professional medical care. None of it promises instant cures. But all of it is real, documented, and accessible. And now it's yours. The pharmacy was never closed. You just didn't know the language. Now you do.